What you know, alibiers. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Hope you guys had a good day. The defense started their case today, and we are going to jump right in with the first witness, Matthew Disogra. He does digital forensics as well as accident reconstruction. He's aware that Dr. Welcher based his report on the analysis that was done by Shannon Burgess. Dr. Welcher testified the time for the backing up event began at 12:31 and 38 seconds, and it ended at 12:31 and 43 seconds. The witness said that would suggest a trigger event lasts 5 seconds, but that trigger event is a single point in time. It's not the event itself, and it's not a timestamp. The defense asked if you calculate the window between the backing up event and the locking of John's phone, would you calculate them from the start of the trigger event or the end? The witness says they reference everything off of the trigger, meaning the beginning. Everything in Aperture's report was referenced off of the end of the recording event, but he went with Aperture's analysis for the work that he did related to this case. The defense asked about the effect of the timing if you start at the trigger event of 12:31 and 38 seconds versus 12:31 and 43 seconds. And the witness said you would have a 5-second difference in every subsequent calculation. The witness identified time offsets from Burgess's January report regarding the backing up event, and also from Dr. Welcher's, who used Burgess's findings. The witness concluded in both Burgess and Welcher's reports, regardless of what adjustments were made to adjust the clock, the phone lock event always occurs after the end of the backing up event. He did get the supplemental report from Burgess a couple of days after May 8th, and as we know, at that point, the trial had already started. Based on the witness's review, there were no circumstances that the locking of the iPhone occurred before the trigger event started. He created a PowerPoint to combine Burgess and Welcher's report to make it into a single source to show what the conclusions would be if he looked at the data as a whole. And the conclusions between January and May were different in the report by Burgess. In the first report, Burgess did some of the calculations necessary to adjust the times, but he never went through the final steps of applying those calculations to the times and then coming up with a final time. In the May supplemental report, Burgess took that analysis to the end, but he approached it in a new way versus the way he approached it in that first report. In the original, he used the phone calls from John's iPhone and the SUV to correct the clock. In the supplemental, he moved away from the phone call analysis and aligned the clocks using a shared maneuver, and that was the 3-point turn, comparing that between the SUV and the phone. The witness did the same process with both reports, and when he ran those numbers and did the calculations, there's some scenarios where the phone lock occurs after the event, there's some where it occurs at the same time of the trigger event, and then another shows it happening before the backing up event. He said there is a range here. They pull up a PowerPoint, and it's a slide from Dr. Welcher's report, and it introduces the difference between the time Aperture calculated for the end of the backup event and the locking of John's phone. On the bottom of Welcher's conclusions, Aperture had put the lock event occurred within approximately 26 seconds of the end of the backup event, but the witness circles the word within, and he has the word after to the side of that. He said based on this slide, it would have been 26 seconds after the backing up event ends that John locked the iPhone. The next slide is the witnesses, but there is a box with information from Welcher's report on there. This is a repeat of the first slide we just talked about, but it's just more in line. Aperture's analysis shows the Lexus backing up event ending at 12:31 and 43 seconds, and the phone lock occurring at 12:32 and 9 seconds, which is a positive 26-second difference. They pull up another slide which lays out John's interaction window, meaning when he interacted with that phone. And he explains when you calculate these numbers and it ends in a positive, that means the locking of the iPhone happened after the backing up event. If the interaction window becomes negative, that means the phone lock would be before the event started. The next slide is showing, based on the first report by Burgess and also Welchers, the phone interaction always occurs after the end of the backing up event. He goes on to talk about some adjustments from Burgess's first report. Once the ignition is turned on, there is a 3-second gap before the time gets registered in the infotainment center. He said the time we see in this report is stale by 3 seconds. This test came from the Lexus that Aperture purchased to do their analysis. The witness points out there was no testing on Karen's actual SUV. His opinion is not all Lexus SUVs will have that 3-second delay. He said it was a close match to Karen's SUV, but without any testing of a second vehicle to say it must be 3 seconds or it varies from car to car, it's hard to say with absolute certainty that it would be a 3-second gap consistently. And the best thing to do would have been to do the key switch adjustment, which is the turning on of the car at 3 seconds, but also to do the entire analysis without it. The witness said he ran the analysis both ways, but notes Burgess did not. The next slide is from Burgess's original January report. This is when they were testing with the purchased SUV, and they did 4 runs of the key on cycles with the 3-second difference. Aperture had a camera in the car with a timer, and they press a button, and later on, when they downloaded the information from the infotainment center, the starting of the car logged 3 seconds later. So he says, there's your 3-second gap right there. Burgess states the average across 4 test runs was 3 seconds. But the witness said Burgess didn't apply his analysis in his report, and he didn't give a reason why he didn't. If you applied the 3 seconds to the trigger event, the gap would grow to a positive 34 seconds between the start of the trigger event and when John's phone was locked. He said the best practice would be to run the analysis with and without the adjustment included. But ultimately, without testing a second vehicle, you can't say for sure if the 3 seconds is only for the SUV they bought and tested, or if it goes across the board to all Lexus SUVs. The next slide is about aligning John's phone. Aperture's reports lay out 2 methodologies. One is based on phone calls, and the other is based on the 3-point turn. The January report from Burgess, he doesn't take it to the end by applying the difference in times to the calculated time for the backup event. He did do the math for the difference in relation to the phone calls from John's phone. In Dr. Welcher's report, he used the phone methodology with the ending of the 3-point turn. Burgess described the 3-point turn as the ending of that event. They show a slide from Burgess's January report showing he identified 7 call logs that exist both in the infotainment center and John's phone. He calculates the difference between those 2 times. He said Burgess did the math, but he didn't apply this to any of the times. So the witness says this is where he steps in. Burgess has John's phone as 2 seconds slower than the infotainment center. The witness did apply the calculations and found that that puts John's interaction window in the positive each time. In the example the witness was showing, it was positive 28 seconds. They show a chart with all possible combinations from the Aperture report, and when the witness calculated all of the numbers, they were positive. The phone lock always ends after the backing up event. He said Burgess did not undertake all possible offset calculations in either his January or May reports. The witness says if there is sufficient data that supports there is a better path or method, you should definitely use that. But in this case, there wasn't. There was no published research or literature to say which path was best. But the most valid approach is to look at all of the data as a whole instead of cherry picking a certain point. In the May supplemental report from Burgess, he took a different approach. The witness said Burgess did two new things here: a new method based on the 3-point turn, and is now following what Welcher stated. And second, he's calculating the actual time in this supplemental report. And he said Burgess comes up with a range now. Prior to this, the reports all used discrete points in time, but now it's what the witness calls a range of uncertainty. The 3-point turn data cannot be precisely aligned. They overlap in the range of seconds, so you have to apply the range, which gives you 9 different conclusions. If you just apply the math in the supplemental report, it spans anywhere from positive 5 seconds to negative 3, and then 1 at the same time of the trigger event. Burgess doesn't provide any data or analysis of any one point being preferential over the other 8, but he says there are more positive than negative numbers. Burgess said that aligning the 3-point turn on a singular point isn't the preferred method. The witness said his opinion is the new offset that Burgess did was a more valid approach. One isn't better than the other, and the results from the additional analysis should be included with all of the analysis so far. In the May report, Burgess did not account for that 3-second offset. The witness said Aperture's method, after they put out that May 8th supplemental report, it came up with 30 different possibilities. 25 of those 30 shows the phone lock happened at the end of the backing up event. 2 of the 30 shows the phone lock happening at the same time of the backing up event. The data recorder showed no history of a collision with the SUV ever. The 2 trigger events on January 29th, in the witness's opinion, were not caused by a collision. None of the trigger events or the data from Aperture indicates there was a collision on January 29th. On cross, he's asked if stepping on the gas hard could cause a trigger event. He says it does, but he doesn't know how much acceleration is needed to start that trigger. He acknowledges the trigger event is only for 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after the trigger event, but whatever triggered the event could be shorter or more than those 10 seconds total. The witness said he was hired to give clarity to the defense around Aperture's work. He did not do any independent testing of the SUV, and he had not read reports from Ian Whiffen or Jessica Hyde. He knew Miss Gaffney had downloaded information, and Shannon Burgess thought information was missing from the chips. The witness said Burgess miscalculated the size of those chips. The witness knows Burgess wanted to come back and try to get additional data from the SUV. The witness was given notice of that testing, and he drafted an affidavit and pointed out some oversights by Burgess. He noticed the mix-up between megabits and megabytes and gigabits and gigabytes. The Commonwealth asks about his experience. He has testified once as a data analyst. He is not a cell phone specialist, and he has never taken classes on cell phone variances, and this is his first time testifying about that. He was there when Burgess was doing this additional testing, and he said he was confused because the witness went in with the expectation that when you write a protocol, you adhere to the protocol, and if you're going to deviate from that, then you have a discussion. It is not customary to shift out of nowhere, but Burgess did. He said Burgess varied from the protocol where he had other chips listed, but it became quickly apparent to the witness that Burgess was focused on that SD card, and that was previously unmentioned. He said Burgess did not explain things to him in one go. The witness just learned as they went along with the testing, which was done, by the way, in both Texas and Massachusetts. Burgess never spoke about what data he expected to get from that card to the witness. But the witness does acknowledge there was data found on that SD card. They talk about the clock variances across devices, which isn't uncommon. The witness said there is no amount of variance that would shock him. The witness said he adopted Aperture's convention. It's not the way he would have done it, but he did keep it in his analysis. They go through iPhone call times and also the bumping into John's car not registering as a collision. On redirect, the defense asks if the 32 steps that were recorded on John's phone would be before or after the backing up event with the phone lock time of 12:32 and 16 seconds. The witness said those steps would have come after. They also reiterate the witness was using Aperture's data for his conclusions. And that was pretty much it for his testimony. They sent the jury home and they did a voir dire of a friend of Michael Proctor's. They had been friends since 6th grade, which equals 30 years at this point. He was on a group text with him that lasted for years. They bring in this text chain with a group of friends. He said he wasn't very active on the group text in general. They did have him turn to where he chimed in on this February 2nd, 2022 conversation. They have him mention that Michael Proctor's nickname is Chip. The witness doesn't have a memory of this text chain. The defense wants him to testify to bring in these texts that Michael Proctor made about Karen Reed without having to call Proctor. And as you could imagine, the Commonwealth does not want it to come in because the witness has no direct knowledge of this text chain. The judge did not make a ruling. So Monday will be very different because I will be switching over to doing daily recaps for the Lori Daybell trial in the Brandon Boudreaux case out in Arizona. I knew these two trials would overlap, and we talked about it on some of the first episodes that it was going to get really hairy once these two trials were going on at the same time. But my plan is about every other day to do a very general recap of testimony in this case, but daily recaps of Lori Daybell because that case very near and dear to my heart. And I definitely want to see this one full circle because this is finally the last trial for her, but we will keep you up to date on what's happening in the Karen Reed case. I will be live streaming both trials. So if you want to watch Karen Reed, it will be up every day. If you want to watch Lori Daybell, I'll be running that live as well. That is it for today. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening, and we will see you soon.